Hello and welcome to the Real EFL Preview Podcast, where we look ahead to 3 fixtures coming up this weekend. My name is Gary Hutchinson and I will be your host for the show. We also tend to discuss the big news stories of the week in the EFL, and it's almost always a manager change. This week is no exception. But before we get into that, please do remember to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Let's get those algorithms on our side and get a few more people joining in the party. Somebody will be joining in the party this evening, as ever, is our resident EFL expert, Kyle Keneally, a man who sees more games than your average EFL scout. How are you this evening, Kyle?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I've had a couple of Lincoln games over the past week. We're obviously at home twice. One was slightly more enjoyable than the other. Obviously beating Peterborough 5-1 on Saturday and losing to Blackpool, which was made even less enjoyable by the fact there is one train that runs after back to Sheffield, and I'm in uni at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and that train was cancelled. So it's completely ruined my evening. Sometimes you wish you don't bother, but obviously you can't see into the future, and I'm always happy to be back watching Lincoln. So it wasn't the most inconvenient of nights. It's just frustrating, and the same thing happened on Sunday night, trying to get back. So I had a lovely rail replacement bus on Sunday evening back to Sheffield.
You can guarantee if the football doesn't spoil your trip, the Great British Transport System will. Just really briefly on the Blackpool-Lincoln game. I know Lincoln lost 2-0, but Blackpool looked a decent side on the break, didn't they? Steve Bruce is doing quite a good job down there.
Yeah, definitely. They obviously won at the weekend. I think the beat Exeter, who have slipped a bit down the table at the moment. But yeah, they certainly looked a very good side. And it was just that clinical edge, which Lincoln have obviously lacked a little bit up until recently. There was obviously the James Collins goal as well, which was disallowed, which perhaps was onside. I haven't yet seen a proper conclusive replays. I don't think you will ever be able to find with the cameras that you get in League One. But yeah, I was impressed by them, and they've obviously picked up a decent bit of form. I think they're only a point behind Lincoln now, and obviously there's still talk around Lincoln with a playoff push from certain aspects of the fan base, and it's still feasibly possible. I know there's a 6-point gap, but the same can also be said for Blackpool. And if they were slightly worse defensively at the weekend against Exeter, conceding twice, they certainly weren't on Tuesday night. They were very, very good. Bodies on the line, exactly everything that you need to pick up an away win. So yeah, I was very, very impressed with that.
Yeah, of course, if you did read my site regularly, Kyle, you will have seen a perfect photograph from directly across the line as Rico Hackett crosses it, and James Collins is 100% onside. But I'll let you off.
That's my fault then, because I do actually read it and I've not seen that. So that is obviously, I cannot account. I don't know why I haven't seen that, to be honest, but there you go.
I've got the indignant look on my face. Just for viewers, I've known Kyle since he was about 12 or 13, and he was writing for my site back then as well. So the fact he doesn't read it now, we need to get a new expert. So we have had some bad nights. One of the bad nights we had recently at Sinsel Bank was Ian Everts, Bolton coming and beating us 1-0 in the EFL Trophy. He's since got the sack, and the first news item that we really want to talk about is Steven Schumacher. Now, he's being heavily linked with the Bolton job. Obviously did a really good job at Plymouth Argyle, went to Stoke and worked with the current Lincoln City coach, Chris Cohen, before being fired. Really interesting links. I think if I was a League One club and Steven Schumacher was being linked with my club, I'd be delighted. But should Trotters fans be happy about this, Kyle?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to finish basically up on what I said last week about Ian Everett and just not perhaps gloat a little bit, but obviously since he's been sacked, Bolton have won twice, one of which at the weekend. I want to say I really enjoyed the reaction of the fact that Bolton had beat him and everything after, because it seemed like a club that felt like they were back. And we spoke about Ian Everett, and I think a lot of the Bolton fans do accept he'd done a good job. It was just, I think, it felt like the natural time to move on. But Saturday felt like a really big statement to the rest of the league that they may have struggled in parts of the season. They may not be in the automatic promotion race anymore, but they are certainly still here. And obviously beating a team like Huddersfield, one of the teams that I seem to tip in every other week for automatic promotion, and they seem to have let me down a little bit at the moment in that regard. But yeah, Bolton beating them felt really big, and this link feels massive as well in Steven Schumacher. I think he's a really good manager. We'd obviously said about the fact that he'd taken Plymouth up from this division, 101 points. Their team was superb that season. A little less successful with Stoke, obviously, but he does feel like a really good manager, and it feels like a really, really good fit for Bolton. And there is plenty of time left in this season. And as I say, with them 2 wins at the moment, it's given them a little bit of momentum going forward. And we know they've got quality throughout the team. So it does feel that if you can get in there, depending on when it is, if it is at the end of this week, there's a couple of days in the market to try and sort of influence some of the decisions in signings. But I think even with the calibre of players that Bolton have got, it feels like that they are certainly good enough to challenge for the playoffs. I know it's not been a particularly happy hunting ground in the last couple of seasons, but I think given the position that Bolton are at the moment, I think they'd certainly be happy with a top 6 finish.
Yeah, I mean, it's a position they really should be in, given their spending power. I mean, they're probably not one of the biggest spenders now. The budgets in League One have gone absolutely crazy. But obviously, Steven Schumacher, really interesting link to Bolton. Now, we might come back to some more general news in League One a little later in the show. Let's see how we get on. But what we're going to do in a change to our usual running order is we're going to go all the way down to the bottom to get us started. We're going to start with the 92nd club in the Football League, and they are Morecambe. They are rock bottom of League One, and they're hosting Fleetwood in 12th. Now, Fleetwood, a side who probably would have expected to be a little bit higher than 12th, given their spending power, essentially. But let's start with Morecambe, the home side. Nice ground, great club. I'm not a Morecambe fan, but I like Morecambe as a club. I've been there a couple of times. I think it's really welcoming. Derek Adams, probably not the most welcoming man. You wouldn't want him at a dinner party, I don't think. He's quite abrasive. But does he have his work cut out, keeping Morecambe in the Football League this season, Kyle?
Yeah, I think when your luck's not with it, you're obviously going to struggle. And if you look at their last 3 results, they've lost each one 1-0, which feels like a bit of I don't want to say a sign for the rest of the season, but when you're down and your luck's not in, these are the fine margins that you don't get. And particularly one of them games, they lost to Colchester in that, which was the only game out of them 3 that wasn't against a promotion chaser. It was lost to Crewe and to Bradford in that time. But they had Lee Angle sent off in stoppage time, controversial sending off. I think there was a little bit said about that in the aftermath of the game, and then they go on to lose that 1-0. A point in that game is a decent result, but it just feels like they're struggling at the moment. Obviously, being the bottom club in the Football League, they had a good few. They had a good few results before Christmas. I think they beat Carlisle and Tranmere. I think they were just after, actually. Because just before Christmas, they'd lost 4 games in all competitions without scoring. One of them was against Lincoln in the EFL Trophy. But that felt like a bit of a time where they'd obviously really struggled. And then them 2 wins against Carlisle and Tranmere had given them a little bit of optimism. And they're obviously the type of sides that you want to beat. The teams that are around you to keep them in closing distance. It's obviously your typical 6-pointer in terms of the division. Since the start of November, though, they sit 20th in the table, if you did the table from that point. They've conceded 17 times in 13 games, which kind of refers to what I was on about in terms of they seem to lose games by a very, very narrow margin. And that is just part of when you're down at the bottom of the table, your luck just doesn't seem to be there, which is that sort of tally puts you in mid-table for that time. It's the fact they've only scored 10, though. There's only 2 sides in the division who have scored less goals in that time. I think it's Gillingham and Carlisle. And obviously Carlisle have gone a bit crazy. Some would probably say in the January transfer window, there seem to be a lot of players that are confident that they'll be playing in the Football League next season. And I don't really want to think what will happen if Carlisle go down in terms of potential administration and what happens. But yeah, obviously the 6 points adrift at the moment. It is the fact, though, that you've got your Tranmere and your Newport who are both in really, really poor form. I think Newport have lost 5 of the last 6. So there is still hope. 6 points, though, feels a really, really big gap to make up at this point in the season, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you talked there about Carlisle going a little bit crazy in the transfer market. Obviously, they did manage, I think, to offload Luke Armstrong. He's moved away after his big move in the transfer window last season. Very reactive. Another team that often tend to be reactive, certainly when they were in League One, are Fleetwood. Now, they had Charlie Adam in charge last season. They weren't a good side. I think they made a really, really solid appointment in Pete Wild, a manager who I have liked from afar for quite a while. But do the Cod Army have what it takes now to embark on a genuine playoff charge in the second half of the season?
Well, I think probably there's a fair amount of sides in League One that would say they have that sort of capability at the moment. There's a lot of teams in the playoff mix, who are actually in the playoff place at the moment. They're separated by only a couple of points. League Two is really tight. We always say this about the Football League and how the divisions seem to be really close together, but League Two seems to be the one at the moment that is the tightest. They have an ability that none of the other teams in the league seem to have, and that is beating Walsall twice in the same season. It is just quite remarkable. I know, obviously, that Walsall had lost to Bradford at the weekend, and there's been a bit of talk. I don't want to say that they've gone on a bad run at all, because they've won 9 games, I think, in a row before that. But the fact that that Fleetwood have gone and beat Walsall again, having beaten them 6-2 in October, which before the Bradford loss was the last time that Walsall had tasted defeat. So it seems they have this ability, as I say, that no other team in the league have in terms of doing the double over them. I don't want to keep touching on Walsall, but 26 goals Walsall conceded all season, I believe. 8 of them have come against Fleetwood, which just seems utterly bizarre. It's 29% of the goals. Moving back on to Fleetwood, though, they are 9 points off the playoffs. They've got a game in hand, though, on Port Vale, and they've got a couple on Crewe in 5th, so they're 11 points behind them. So it does feel that they've got a little bit of a chance. They would obviously need a massive run in the second half of the season. They have quite a decent start to January. They've won 3 of the past 4. Losing to Carlisle, which obviously is to Morecambe's detriment in that time, in terms of the fact that it's moved, put them bottom of the table. But since Pete Wilder's come in, I think he came in just over Christmas, they sit 5th in the table. So obviously that is playoff form for you. They've won 4 of the 7 games, and they've only lost twice. So if there is any team from that sort of lower section, and with so many teams compact together in the playoff places at the moment, one of the teams at least are bound to drop off, and they'll be playing each other every week. So there is definitely the ability of a team to come from what feels like nowhere and surprise a team in the league. And there is no reason that it cannot be. Can it be Fleetwood? As you say, you have admiration for Pete Wilder. I really liked him. He did a brilliant job. With Barrow, took him on the brink of the playoffs in both the seasons after they'd finished, I think it was 21st and 22nd in the 2 seasons before. So I think he's got a really good chance. And if it's not this year, I think there's definitely potential for next season for them to be in the mix.
Yeah, I think that's almost certain. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction, because I think the prediction here is fairly obvious. I will just apologise to Walsall fans, by the way, because I am cursed in EFL Fantasy League, and I backed Walsall this week, so you were always going to lose 2. But I did also back Lee Evans at Blackpool, and he was injured and missed both games, which was quite good as well. So the curse did work in Lincoln's favour, although we did still lose. So while we're talking about League One, let's move on to another struggling side. You've picked all struggling sides this week to talk about. We're going to Shrewsbury. They're rock bottom of the table. And they're hosting Mansfield Town, who are 12th. So they're bottom of the top half, which isn't a bad place to be for a promoted side. When you look at the table as well, Shrewsbury have been really cut adrift at the bottom of League One. How difficult is it going to be for Gareth Ainsworth to now turn things around for Salop?
Yeah, it does feel really tough at the moment, and that is also due to the fact that it seems the other three teams that are in the relegation zone have just suddenly decided to start winning games again, which for a long while felt like it wasn't going to happen. Incidentally, Bolton had actually won their first game of the season against Shrewsbury. I think it was the 9th of November. And this is where Shrewsbury struggle. They don't seem to beat the teams that are around them, the teams at the bottom of the table. So as I say, I referred to that Bolton loss there. They were thrashed 4-1 by Cambridge. They lost 4-1 against Peterborough back in August, losing to Bristol Rovers. You kind of get where I'm going with this. The only team they actually beat in that bottom 6 at the moment were Crawley, when they won that ridiculous 8-goal thriller back on the 12th of October. I think that was a day there were so many goals in so few games in League One over the international break. And Gareth Ainsworth hasn't actually done a particularly bad job since he's come in, and obviously now he's got the Lincoln links, and he's done a brilliant job with Wycombe over the years. Not so much at QPR, but it does really feel like he's got his work cut out now, and they are going to struggle for the rest of the season. And as I say, when you've got the teams around you starting to pick up form, it does feel a bit like you are going to struggle. It's also interesting the fact that they've beaten 2 of the top 3, obviously Birmingham being his first game, and that game against Wrexham, which is a cross-country derby. I know it was just the importance of 2 huge home games and the fact that played a part into it. I don't know. But obviously, you need to win your 6-pointers if you're gonna stay in the division. So since Gareth Ainsworth's come in, they've only lost 2 games by more than a 1-goal margin, which again feels like I'm basically talking about Morecambe Part 2 here. The fact they don't lose many games and they seem to be by the odd goal. So they went on a run of 1 loss in 6 at the end of 2024 and the start of 2025. So they beat Lincoln on Boxing Day, and obviously, as I said, they beat Wrexham. If you're looking a little bit towards the future, they've got 4 games at the start of March, which when I was looking at their fixtures really stood out for me. So they go to Peterborough, they host Bristol Rovers, they are then at Exeter, and they play Burton. So they are 4 teams all in the bottom, 17th and below in the table, and they have Crawley on the final day of the season, who are also still obviously in the bottom 4 with them. So it's them sort of games that really they need to be picking up points. And as I say, the fact they've got 4 games in a row against teams that are struggling in the division at the moment feels like that could be make or break. So in the next obviously month and a little bit, it feels like they just need to sort of stay within at least some sort of touching distance. I think they're 7 points adrift at the moment. So if they can stay somewhat a few points and then pick up 6, 7, 8 points in that time, then they may give themselves a chance. But at the moment, it feels really tough to predict Shrewsbury to stay up.
Well, I'm going to upset Shrewsbury fans. I wrote you off at the beginning of the season, and I've seen absolutely nothing at all to change my mind. But I think long-term, Gareth Ainsworth will bring you back into League One once he gets his imprint. I just think he's come in too little too late this season. Now, they are hosting Mansfield Town. When you look to the teams that came up last season, Wrexham, Stockport, you expected them to do well. Crawley, you expected them to struggle. Mansfield, probably you were looking at them being mid-table. Now, they've got a mid-table budget. They've actually got a bigger budget than some existing League One sides, such as Lincoln and Peterborough, I'm led to believe. So they've been well backed. But even so, Mansfield Town fans will have been satisfied with a mid-table finish this season. But do you think they'll feel disappointed having been playoff front runners early doors?
Yeah, I think in some respects it is always I think I referred to it so many times before, when a team exceed expectations at one point and then they drop off. And obviously I'm not talking in this instance that there's any sort of pressure on Nigel Clough, but it does feel that there is that disappointment. If Mansfield had been mid-table for the whole season, then I think the fans would have been relatively or even more satisfied. And if they were in a relegation battle and then had won a few games and got themselves out of it again, they would have been happier. It's just when you're sort of given that false dawn early doors when they'd obviously been inside the playoff places and they seem to have dropped off a little bit now, that's where the disappointment comes from. And Nigel Clough instantly alluded to the fact that confidence is dwindling. They lost to Crawley in midweek. That was their 4th loss in a row in all competitions. 2 of the sides as well. This is again where the disappointment I feel comes from. 2 of the sides they'd obviously lost to, one of them being Crawley there, Cambridge, both inside the bottom 4. So it does feel that when you're not beating teams, or when you're in fact losing to teams inside the bottom 4, there is that even greater disappointment. And it does feel even weirder the fact they've come off the start of the year beating Bolton and Stockport. They've won 4 games out of 5. I think they'd beat Rotherham and Peterborough over that time. They lost to Reading on the 29th of December. So it felt like at that point they'd started to revive their season again. They'd a little bit of a run before that, where I think in November they'd lost all 3 games. But that run has been a false dawn. So they are now 9 league losses in 14. If you take out, obviously, that run, it is literally, if you exclude them 4 games they've won, it is literally every game they've lost during that time. So it does feel they've taken a massive hit at the moment. Some of that will have been losing Lee Gregory for injury for a little bit at that time. They do have two of the top scorers in League One, in Will Evans and Lee Gregory. They make up 56% of their goals, though, so there's a really big reliance on them two at the moment. So if they're not firing, Mansfield obviously will struggle, but they should be more than comfortable this season in mid-table. They are 13 points above the bottom 4, so I don't think there's any real concern about relegation. But going into this game at the weekend, I think Shrewsbury will obviously take some confidence from the fact that Mansfield have lost 2 games recently against teams that Shrewsbury are in the bottom 4 with. So hopefully, they, at least for Shrewsbury, they can take that and go and get a result at the weekend.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope Mansfield's bad run continues, because I picked up my tickets for the trip to Field Mill at the beginning of February with Lincoln. So fingers crossed it drags on a little bit until then. Just really quickly, Kyle, I just want to touch on another bit of news that's come out in the League One playoff race today. And that's Huddersfield Town, who put out quite an odd statement regarding Joe Taylor's injury. He's obviously a big money signing for them, scored on his debut. There's always lots of talk when a player signs, particularly at Lincoln, if he signs and he's on the bench and they go, oh, he can't be fit. Joe Taylor hadn't played a lot of football. They assumed he was fit. He started 2 games, 6 weeks out, injured now. How much of a blow is that going to be to Huddersfield?
Massive. It does feel really big, and they're not on the greatest of runs at the moment either. I think they've won 1 of the last 7. They've lost to Bolton and Birmingham in the past 2. It did the whole scenario surrounding this when I looked earlier, and you had the statement they put out, which didn't actually allude to it even being an injury. I can't remember the exact word they had used. But yeah, the 3-minute video as well. I don't think I've ever seen a 3-minute video for a player being injured. It seems like the type of thing that would be acceptable if a player had done his ACL for the 3rd time or something like that in that sort of scenario when a player's out for a lot longer. But yeah, for a player to have just come to Bolton and be injured, and then they put all this out, seems a bit like they're trying to. I don't know what the scenario is behind it. I think they've struggled a bit with injuries at parts of the season, so I think they're just trying to. I don't want to say cover it up, but just try and get fans on side a little bit and say that. But even the club statement felt a little long. As I said earlier in the show, Huddersfield have been a team that I've continually backed to finish inside the top 2, and it just feels like, I don't want to say the season's fallen apart, but it does feel like it's taken a bit of blow in recent weeks. And one of the teams I seem to keep missing out when I talk about the promotion race, alongside Birmingham, because I think they're already up, to be honest, is Wickham. Richard Cone's been the subject of interest, rejecting a £6 million bid from Luton. I think he might have put a little bit more on that after he scored twice in midweek to beat Mansfield. And they've just had Caleb Taylor come back. He'd been recalled by West Brom. I think he'd played in the cup game, but he's back for the rest of the season. And it does feel now that they have turned around a bit their form. I think they've lost 2 or 4 sort of around the end of the year, but they're now 3 wins from 4 in all competitions. So I'm going to give up on backing a team for automatic promotion, because it seems like it will change every week. But at the moment, it feels like Huddersfield are certainly starting to struggle a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pick Huddersfield as my team on the Fantasy EFL this week, and that will compound their misery. So we've got all these teams hunting a spot in the Championship, and that's where we are going to finish our show. We are going to finish our show, though, with 2 teams who may just be scrabbling to avoid the trapdoor down into the dreaded League One, and that's Hull City and Stoke City. The battle of the cities, 19th versus 20th. Both have sacked managers this season. Both have got new managers in. Both new managers on paper look very good. Ruben Sellers versus Mark Robins. So it sees 2 sides with relatively new gaffers, level on points. How do you see this game going?
This is one that I would struggle to call, in all honesty, as I seem to do every week. That is my fault for setting myself up for a game like this. Hull have been 13th, if you again take the table from when Ruben Sellers had taken over. So they've won 4, drawn 2 and lost 5. Scored 13, conceded 12. So they're relatively decent statistics in that time. 14 points from them games, which, as I say, puts you in mid-table. And that is not a position that Hull are currently occupying. But their win at Sheffield United on Friday night just felt massive. It felt really, really unexpected as well. This is a Sheffield United side that we seem to bang on about. The great home record. I believe they were still unbeaten at home as well, and that came crashing down. Aside from that, though, they'd lost to informed QPR, but they'd beaten Millwall and drawn to Leeds prior to that. So there had been this start of a turn at the moment. His first few games have been a little inconsistent. They finished December with 2 wins and 2 losses, but it does feel that Hull have turned a little bit of a corner at the moment. Stoke have been really tough to beat. I think the 3 games this month have ended 0-0. Mark Robins is yet to win, but I do feel that he's yet to win in the league. They beat Sunderland in the FA Cup, but I do feel he's definitely the manager that will keep them up in this season. I don't think any of these teams are in realistic danger of going down this season, so I think they'll finish relatively comfortably in mid-table.
So you said there about Mark Robins, he's made Stoke tough to beat. I mean, it seems like a silly question, really, but how integral is that for a relegation battle?
Oh, I mean, it's massive, isn't it? It is crucial. If you're not going to score many goals, as I say, they haven't massively with the 3-0 in there. But if you're not going to, then you've got to be defensively resilient. They've obviously lost Tom Cannon. Nathan Lowe's obviously come in there, and he cannot go back out on loan. I don't think that was ever the intention when they'd recalled him. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get a few goals this season. He's obviously not going to. You wouldn't expect him to score 10 or more, but if you can chip him with sort of 5, 6, 7, then perhaps that'll be good enough, and it'll give him a good stead for next season to go on. And I don't know whether he'll stay. If Stoke will look to get a striker in the summer window and perhaps go out to League One. I don't know what their plans are at the moment with him, but yeah, the defence has been much better. They had that defeat, I think it was at Portsmouth, but Portsmouth seemed to be, excluding the fact they lost to Millwall in midweek, they have a ridiculous home record at the moment. I think they scored 3 or 4 in plenty of games in the past couple of months. But on their travels, they seem to be awful. So that result was not massively unexpected. But as I say, I think Stoke will be more than fine this season in terms of staying in the division.
Yeah, and we look at Hull City. They did look in real dire straits early part of the season, but they've certainly turned it around, and they won the race. And it was if the media is to be believed, a heated race full of competitors for Louis Barry, who was on loan at Stockport. Now, Louis Barry obviously made his name, or was a name, for playing over, I think, with Barcelona as a teenager. Since then, disappointing loan spell at Ipswich, looked like he was going to be a bit of a flop. Really did bounce back with Stockport County. He's gone to Hull City. How important is that for Hull in their battle against the drop?
I've got to say, I was a little bit surprised in terms of the fact they've gone to Hull. I've seen a few of their fans say they aren't in a relegation battle. I still think, for the meantime, at least they are. As I've said, I think they'll be more than comfortable this season. I am a little bit surprised, though, that Hull, not the fact that he's gone there, but more so the fact that they've obviously, I don't want to say chucked a lot of money at him, but as you say, if you are to be believed, and there were multiple teams in the Championship, I think probably half the division were looking at taking him for the rest of the season. I don't really see Hull having a genuine attempt to finish in the playoffs at this point, which obviously seems a bizarre statement to say. But I think if you're going to make this sort of calibre of signing, and I don't think they'll go down there, it seems a little bit weird that not only that he's picked Hull to go to, but the fact that Hull have taken him. It seems a sort of signing, if you were in mid-table and you wanted to propel your season towards the playoffs, it'd be that sort of signing to make. This is no disrespect towards Hull at all. I'm just a little bit baffled that a club that seemingly are going nowhere this season have taken him, and obviously will go back to Villa in the summer, and then they're not going to sell him at current. So it does seem a little strange to me that he's gone there. But it'll be really interesting to see how he does in the division. As you say, he's been excellent at Stockport. Really, really good. I think he's still actually second top goal scorer. It was only Richard Kone's 2 goals on Tuesday night that have now overtaken him. So he's got obvious quality, and I really do want to see how he'll do in the Championship in terms of his progression. I'm just, as I say, a little bit baffled that he's gone there, but I will certainly be enjoying his loan time there and see how he does.
Now, finally, somebody that has plenty of game time in the Championship is Matt Grimes. We're coming away from Hull and Stoke, but Coventry City aside, who were on the cusp of the Premier League not so long ago. It's not been quite a successful time since, but they've managed to capture Matt Grimes. He's joined the Sky Blues. To round off our expert EFL coverage, Kyle, what's your verdict on that particular transfer manoeuvre?
Well, there's obviously 2 perspectives you can look at this from. The first one is the Swansea side of it, and the fact that it seems a little weird. You've got a player that's played for the club for 10 years. There's been talk a little bit of a falling out. I don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. Swansea seem to have slipped off a little bit. They always seem to be a sort of mid-table Championship club. At least they have been for a fair bit of time. There's the clubs that you put in the bracket of your Bristol City and your Preston that seem like they've been in that sort of scenario for a while. If you just look at his record, though, it has been magnificent in terms of everyone. There is the phrase, availability is the best ability. I think it's something like that. If you look from the 2018-19 season onwards, he has played 45 Championship games, 46, 45, 46, 44, 46. So he's missed 4 Championship games in that time. And he's played every league minute this season. I think the only time he hasn't played in any game for Swansea this season was the final half hour of their FA Cup tie at Southampton. It feels a really, really big coup for Coventry. And who knows where they go this season from here. It feels, as I say, massive for them, this signing.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much, Kyle. Do you know what? In terms of scheduling as well, you hit almost exactly 30 minutes there. I don't know if you were watching the clock, but that was superb. We do try and be a 30-minute show. We will be bringing Kyle back next week, along with myself, where we will be looking ahead to 3 more games. And who knows, we might even start in League One and mix it up. This has been the Real EFL Preview Show, where we try and give you some expert advice and opinion on the EFL. Please do remember to subscribe to the channel to make sure you get all our content like this video. Let's get YouTube algorithms on our side. In the meantime, thank you from Kyle, thank you from me, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.